Good evening, everyone. My name is Prentice Butler. I'm Chief of Staff Alderman Sylvie King, 4th Ward, State of Chicago. Today, we're having a follow-up discussion regarding the Obsidian Collection, the project on the 3700 block of South King Drive that looks to rehab the former Lou Palmer mansion and to bring it back into the 21st century as one of the crown jewels in our community, preserving Black culture, and to really give us something that's going to be a wonderful community icon going forward. So we've heard your concerns at the meeting we had this past fall, things about parking, traffic, zoning, and today we wanted to address those issues and move the conversation forward. So we appreciate you joining the meeting today. We're going to start with introductions from the team, and I'd like to introduce everyone again, the head of the Obsidian Collection, Ms. Angela Ford.
Hello.
Thank you, Prentice. I'll get the presentation started. Is my screen showing now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Liz Butler. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister. And along with my colleague who's on tonight with me, Braden Lord, we represent the owner of the property located at 3654 South Martin Luther King Drive, Miss Angela Ford with the Obsidian Collection Archive. And we thank our neighbors and friends for joining us this evening to discuss the proposal that Prentice summarized to rezone, rehab, and reactivate the existing historic building at the property. Thank you to Prentice, thank you to Alderwoman King, and thank you to Patrick Murphy, the zoning administrator, who has also generously joined us this evening. From our team, I'm pleased to introduce again Ms. Ford, the Executive Director of the Obsidian Collection Archives, who is the owner of the subject property. Joining us from NIA Architects is Anthony Akindelli and Hugo Prill. They are the project architect. Peter Lemon is a traffic engineer with Kimley Horn and Associates, the traffic consultant for the project. And Christina Dickens is the business licensing attorney for the project. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Braden Lord, who will walk through the proposed development.
Everyone, this is Braden Lord here, Liz's colleague. I'll start with, as Liz mentioned, a summary of the proposed development. So the Obsidian Collection here is proposing the substantial rehabilitation and reactivation of this long vacant historic building located at 3656 South King Drive, including a change of use for the building from residential to mixed use with residential, nonprofit, and commercial uses. The scope of work for the proposed physical improvements to the property include a complete restoration of the exterior facades, cleaning and tuck pointing of the masonry, and construction of a rear building addition to accommodate a new stair and elevator and to make the upper floors accessible, as well as a complete interior renovation of the existing building. To enable this proposal and its approximately $9 million investment in the property owner is seeking approval of a zoning change from the current RM5 residential multi-unit district to the B32 community shopping district, as well as a special use approval from the ZBA for a community center at the property. We'll discuss those proposed uses in a bit more detail later on, including the programming and operations. But first, I'd like to orient you to the subject property. As you can see on this property location slide, we have an aerial image of the subject property. It's located on the northwest corner of South Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and East 37th Street in the Bronzeville neighborhood, and this is in the Douglas community area. The property contains approximately 11,880 square feet of site area and is bounded by an existing residential property on the north along King Drive and a surface parking lot to the west along 37th. With regards to the existing conditions at the property itself, the property is improved with a historic 3-story principal structure and a 2-story accessory structure in the rear. The main structure is orange rated according to the Chicago Historic Resources Survey. And that means that it possesses some architectural or historical association that makes it significant in the context of the surrounding community. The existing building was designed in the Queen Anne style by a noted architect by the name of William Wilson Clay of the firm Wheelock and Clay, and it was constructed in about 1885. Notably, Latrell Lew and Georgia English Palmer acquired this property in 1976 and resided there for many years. Lew Palmer was a celebrated Black journalist, and together the Palmers were noted community activists. Lew Palmer, in particular, was regarded as a pillar of the community. The existing building was historically used as a single-family home. In the 1920s, however, it was repurposed as a multi-unit residential building. It has been substantially vacant and dormant now since approximately 2006. The owner acquired the property in the spring of 2021 and intends to rehabilitate and reactivate the site in a manner that would serve and be an amenity to the surrounding neighborhood. Briefly, to address the zoning and land uses in the area, the property itself is zoned as part of the RM5 residential multi-unit district and is surrounded by land uses even within the RM5 district that include office, retail, personal service, and a museum. At this time, I'll turn this presentation over to Angela Ford, the Executive Director of the Obsidian Collection Archives. Angela is going to say a few words about the Obsidian Collection and will share her vision for the Obsidian House and the preservation and reactivation of this beautiful historic mansion. So, Angela, take it away.
Thank you. Our vision for the property is to serve as the headquarters of our organization. We are a digital archive of Black historic archives and a creative hub for Black journalists. So we are really about reclaiming the Black narrative. So the space will operate as a private membership club where people are allowed to grab light bites to eat, but we will be keeping, for the most part, library hours. We're not in a social club as much as we're more like an academic club, if you will. But we'll also have 2 residences in the property. We are establishing relationships with global organizations. We just partnered with a university in London. And so we will have fellows and interns that will serve as residences while they're studying our archives and working with the community.
Thank you, Angela. Braden?
Thanks a ton, Angela. As you all heard from Angela just now, the property will serve several functions, including office, limited food and beverage, retail sales, a cultural exhibit, and general community center uses. The property will serve as a physical location for the digital archives, including a museum, library, and archive, as well as some office and eleemosynary cultural institution spaces. Additionally, as you heard, the owner proposes to establish a membership-based co-working space. This would be similar in nature to the Wing or WeWork. The Obsidian House would offer workspace and private rooms for Zoom meetings, some reservable conference rooms for collaboration, creative spaces for digital content and podcast creation, as well as a space for some curated programming for members. So they're imagining networking opportunities, wellness programming, workshops, and some panelists with guest speakers at the site. The Obsidian collection and the Obsidian House would engage in some limited retail sales of merchandises. You imagine Obsidian branded t-shirts, tote bags, and art prints. Retail sales are generally not permitted in the current zoning district, but would be allowed under the proposed B3 district zoning classification. There will be a small cafe that will serve coffee and refreshments to members of the Obsidian House and their guests. However, the cafe will not serve or sell alcohol, and the owner will not seek a liquor license. Food and beverage concepts are generally not permitted under the current zoning classification, but the development team views this component as a critical element of their proposal. Historically, the property served a residential function containing as many at one time as 15 dwelling units. The owner proposes to keep 2 of those residential dwelling units at the property. That residential component would be prioritized for use by visiting scholars or fellows of partner organizations, but would also serve as a revenue producing component from which to service the construction and permanent financing and rehabilitation and historic preservation of the property. Finally, the property will occasionally feature programming that will be open to and curated for residents of the community. So that will include wellness programming, limited cultural or educational programming for children and adults, a viewing of cultural exhibits, small-scale screenings of arts and cultural work, community meetings and convention space, and some educational or perhaps professional workshops. The scope of community-oriented programming that are proposed fits within the community center use under the zoning ordinance, which will be allowed here when approved as a special use. I'd like to briefly walk through the proposed floor plans to explain how the various components of the building will function. What you're seeing now is the basement plan. This is the lower level, and it will predominantly serve as operations and archival space for the Obsidian Collection archives. Obsidian Collection staff will digitize materials down here and will maintain the temperature-controlled archives. The Obsidian House members will have access to this area to view artifacts. A single residential unit is proposed to be located on this floor as well, as you can see. Now moving on to the main floor plan. This is the first floor you're seeing now. The main floor will primarily serve as open co-working space for members of the Obsidian House to work, meet, socialize, and create content. This part of the building can be accessed from either the basement or the first floor. Access will be controlled. The main entrance will be staffed by a concierge who will check members in. On this floor, we propose to have a mail room that will be made available to members of the house that are subscribed to that service, a small kitchen that will store food bites prepared in a commercial kitchen, which will be available for purchase by members. 2 bathrooms, as you can see in the northwest corner, each floor will contain 2 bathrooms. And then here you also see at the west or the rear of the building, the proposed addition to accommodate an elevator and a new stair. This addition is required to make the upper floors accessible. We'll move on to the second floor plan. The second floor contains various small meeting rooms. Individuals or organizations with memberships to the Obsidian House will be able to reserve these spaces online and hold small group meetings in them. Private booths on the floor will allow some members to take phone calls or have private conversations. The Obsidian Collection archives will have a dedicated office on this floor as well. And you can see the rear addition to the building, there's that area to accommodate a new elevator and stair. Moving on to the third floor plan. This is the top floor, and it contains a residential apartment, a podcast room, and a community meeting room. Stepping back, just to make two general points about operations. As Angela mentioned, the hours of operation will generally be 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, with limited activities in the evening and on Saturday and Sunday from time to time. The Obsidian House will initially operate with approximately 10 employees, and approximately 50 to 60 construction jobs will be created as a result of the project. And with that, I will hand things back to Liz Butler to address some parking and transportation considerations. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you for the overview, Braden. This is our second time presenting the plan to the community, and there were a couple of issues that came up at our last meeting that we wanted to address specifically. One, namely, is parking and transportation. So the subject property does not have any parking on site. The property owner engaged Kimley Horn, who is on the call today with us. Kimley Horn is a transportation planning and engineering firm, and they conducted a study to evaluate the potential impact on traffic in the surrounding area. Peter Lemon can answer any questions in that regard. But importantly, in response to questions and comments that we received at our meeting in June, Angela worked with the Board of Education to negotiate and enter into a preliminary agreement for the use of parking spaces in the parking lot at Wells Academy at 249 East 37th Street. So 10 parking spaces will be made available on an ongoing basis, and the Obsidian collection will have the option to use additional parking spaces in that lot on a case-by-case basis. We had some other follow-up questions that we wanted to address before we open up to discussion. Angela, there was a question raised about the financing for the project and what sources of funding you have secured or intend to secure for construction and financing of the project.
Thank you. So our funding is going to be a combination of equity and debt, more of a traditional financing package. What we will not be doing is looking for any kind of bond issue or any kind of public dollars that might involve neighboring taxpayers. So this will not impact the neighbors' wallets as some larger projects do. Ours is a completely privately financed endeavor.
You. And there was a question around whether the Obsidian collection was intending to or had already purchased other commercial space in the area, and if so, how that is impacting this current proposed development.
We haven't purchased any other property in the area, and we are 110% committed to the Obsidian House.
Thank you. And then there was some discussion at our last meeting about occupancy and what you anticipate in terms of the number of memberships that you would expect for the private co-working space. Could you address that, Angela?
So we, in our first year of projections, we are projecting anywhere from 10 to 20 membership organizations in the first year. We have probably a 3-year rollout plan, and we're building the project in phases. So that's our plan, for 10 to 20 members in the first year.
We show on our site plan, and we talk a little bit about the accessory structure on the property, which we call the coach house. Could you talk a little bit about what you're proposing for the coach house, whether there are plans already available for that, and what the uses will be in the coach house programming and uses?
So the plans for the coach house have not been designed yet, but the coach house is 6,000 square feet, and it's a direct extension of the plans for the mansion. So there'll be additional meeting rooms, additional spaces, but it is not a separate, it is not going to be doing something separate than what our overall mission and vision is for the project.
Thank you. And then a final question that we received in advance of the meeting related again to the parking requirements for the project. And we, based on Kimley Horn's updated analysis and changes to the zoning ordinance, we know that the parking requirement for the project, it would be 3 parking spaces, and we're proposing 10 off-street parking spaces that will be made available for the Obsidian House. With additional spaces available
Yes.
if needed.
I'm very excited that Wells Preparatory and the Chicago Public Schools Real Estate Division was very supportive. It is our understanding that a lot of the CPS schools have been partnering with developments that surround them for a lot of practical reasons. And so this school is going to do the same. We've even talked about potential field trips where they could walk a half a block down and attend an event at the house. And so we're really excited to just be a part of the community with 10 designated spaces when we need them.
And before we conclude, a final kind of comment or question or issue that was raised at our last meeting was the B3 zoning, and what would that allow at the property, and how could neighbors be assured that after the property is rezoned, only your use could operate here? And so in discussing this and going back and forth with the 4th Ward staff and Alderman King, we have agreed to, after the project is up and operational and has its permits and licenses, to downzone the property back to its prior zoning classification, so that the community can be assured that only this use can operate here at the property. So we wanted to make sure that we raised that because that was something that was discussed at quite a bit at our prior meeting. So we hope that that gives folks the assurances that they are looking for about how this property will be used going forward. So with that, we hope that this presentation has answered some of your questions. I want to echo Prentice's sentiments that this is an exciting development that will bring new life to this historic building. Our entire team is available to answer any questions from the audience, and we thank you for joining us tonight.
For those of you that would like to answer or ask some questions tonight, if you would like to raise your hand, I can elevate you to panelist. If you choose not to be on camera today, you can put your questions in the chat. We do have one question that's already in the Q&A. What is the time frame to actually open once the renovation is completed? That is the first question we have in the Q&A.
Well, we have a timeline of perhaps a year after we achieve a zoning change.
Okay. And Ward, I believe you are the first person. Then we get to the next person, Mr. Garrett, I believe. So Ward,
all right.
question.
Can you hear me all right, Prentice and everyone?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm Ward Miller. I'm sorry. I'm in a COVID isolation, so forgive my voice and everything. I'm executive director of a group called Preservation Chicago. We're a nonprofit advocacy preservation group, and I just want to say that we're really excited to see this project move along. This home, originally the Judge Palmer and Judge Hammer and Lou and Georgia Palmer House is a spectacular building, and it was one of our 2019 Chicago 7 most endangered properties in Chicago. And we were really at a loss for what this could be. It's been vacant for a long time. It's certainly one of Chicago's finest Queen Anne buildings. in the heart of Bronzeville, and here it has been sitting vacant for so long. So we're really excited to see the project. Angela Ford, Miss Angela Ford, has reached out to us and has sort of kept us in the loop on this. And we're very excited for not only the owner and this vision, but for the restoration of this building, the reuse of the structure, and to bring another institution to Chicago, a philanthropic institution that has so much great potential. We just feel that this is an incredible asset. So I want to thank Alderwoman King and Prentice, and of course Angela Ford, and the team here for making this a possible reality, and that we really support this project at Preservation Chicago. We think this will be wonderful. We're hoping that maybe even a Chicago landmark designation could be pursued in the future. But thank you for the opportunity to just say, on behalf of all of us in the preservation and architecture community, thank you for coming forward with such an incredible reuse plan, restoration plan, and revisioning of a tremendous house that is so important historically, culturally, and architecturally to our city. So thank you.
Well, thank you on behalf of the development team for your strong endorsement of this proposal. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. Prentice, can I address a question that was in the chat from an anonymous attendee? The question is, will this not be a bed and breakfast? And the answer is no, it will not be a bed and breakfast. It will be a co-working space, a cultural exhibit, community center, and 2 dwelling units, primarily reserved for fellows that are visiting from partner organizations.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and answer the next question that we had in Q&A regarding the parking spaces? Where would they be located?
So the 3 parking spaces will be located at the Wells Academy parking lot. All of the parking will be located off-site.
Okay, let's go back to another live question with Mr. Keith Walker.
Good evening. I'm here with my wife Dolores, and we live on the block about 4 houses down from the Lou Palmer house. We've been here since 2001, and this has been an eyesore for us all of these years. So we appreciate Ms. Ford, wanting to actually develop this property. It's been long overdue, but we do have major concerns about parking. You said earlier that you would make arrangements with the school for 10 parking spots. That pretty much just covers the people that you employ, if I'm not mistaken, if I heard that correctly, in terms of people employed at the proposed site. So that's a really big concern for us in terms of parking. One of the reasons why we stay in Bronzeville on this particular block all of these years and not living on the north side is because we can always find a parking space in front of our house. And that's a big concern for us. One of the questions I had as it relates to the Wells parking, what is the contractual agreement with the school? Is that a multi-year contract that you're doing with them for those 10 parking spots? And also, have you considered leveling the coach house in the back of the facility to gain the extra parking spaces that you might need?
Mr. Walker, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you to your wife as well for joining us and raising these questions. Some of these items we did talk about at the last meeting, so I'm gonna try to recall how we address those. But the coach house can not be demolished to accommodate parking. It's part of the historic structure at the property, so that unfortunately is something that we explored, but is not a feasible option to address parking. to answer your question about what is the arrangement with the Board of Education, it will be a license agreement. We currently have an executed LOI for the use of 10 parking spaces, but we can increase the number of parking spaces. And I think that we probably would be happy to agree to a reevaluation of the parking impact to see if we really do need to add a greater number of parking spaces. And then Peter, sorry to put you on the spot, but maybe now I might ask you to talk about the analysis that Kimley Horn did on the likely traffic and parking impact that we anticipate from this proposed use.
Sure thing. So good evening. My name is Peter Lemon with Kimley Horn. And as Liz said, we did a traffic and parking evaluation related to the different components that are comprised in the plan. And Keith, I think you mentioned like the 10 employees, that might gobble up all 10 spaces, at Wells Academy, excuse me. And so when we do the traffic projections and parking projections, it's based on a per square footage number. And so I think part of it too is related to co-working spaces. So I think Ms. Ford talked about like the number of being, like 10 to 20 like members. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all members, especially with co-working spaces, are there at the same time or on the same day all the time. And so it's really about 3,400 square feet of space, which really only amounts to typically a couple spaces. And when you factor in, different modes of transportation, whether it's walking or transit with the bus, that starts to break that down a little bit. Again, I think as Liz said, I think there's the city requirements for parking, and then there's, I think, what we might think of as more practical need. So maybe it's more than the 3, it might be the more practical need, which is why I think securing the spaces at Wells Academy is helpful. I think the goal is to try to avoid, relying on street parking. We did do parking counts in the area back in June of we kind of looked like 35th to 38th King to Calumet in that area. There's about 310 off, on-street spaces. We counted at different times, looking at, say, late morning when co-working would be more popular. We also looked in the evening, like 6 to 8 p.m. when you might have more of an event related to like a cultural event. At the busiest time, it was half full, so we still had 150 spaces available. And we wouldn't expect to need to use a significant portion of those. I also understand, as a neighbor, you definitely want to have, spaces and convenience available on site, or, near your home. So if there were to be a couple spaces on street, I think there's still a lot of spaces still available. Although I think securing the agreement with some off-street spaces down the block is helpful to try to avoid relying on any on-street parking if possible. So I think between those two combinations, I think there should be plenty of parking available for residents and people in the neighborhood beyond a couple spaces that might get used by people visiting the site.
All right. So go ahead.
Ms. Ford indicated that the parking that would be leased from Chicago Public Schools was on an as-needed basis. Does that also include parking for the 2 residential spaces that would be housed within the facility, depending on the number of individuals that are occupying those 2 spaces?
Yeah.
So those are efficiencies. Those would be occupants for 1 person, and odds are they will be from out of town and not own a car, but if they do, those spaces will, the 10 spaces, those people were also kind of counted as employees as well. They would be part of the school lot. I mean, they would, does that make sense? They would be part of the school, but we can also increase the parking if necessary at the school. They have a lot of spaces. We were required, well, the study said we could have 3, so we took the initiative to negotiate 10. And then also our very detailed study said that most of the time there are about 200 spaces available in the community on the street. So we feel like we wouldn't disturb your standard of living with our location, with our plans. Does that
With
make
all,
sense?
yeah, with all due respect, since we live four houses down from that building, we would be affected every day.
I see.
Because no one else is gonna park, 2 blocks away to walk up when they find a spot right in front of our house.
Great.
I see. Well, the school is right there, and those, I mean, you know what school we're talking about, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah, we do.
those designated spaces, and because there'll be members, we'll have relationships. It's not like a store with random customers. These are members, and we'll be able to make sure that our membership respects the community.
Within reason, of course. What about the space behind the coach house? I know that belongs to, I believe, the apartment building that's across, the condo building that's across on 37th Street.
Yeah,
Have
our
you guys
understanding is
reached out
that-
to them?
No, that parking lot serves the condo building, and they're all owned in fee by the condo owners. So there's no excess parking there that's available for use.
Right, but have you talked to them though? Because on any given day, there's only 3 cars in that lot every day. I pass by it every day, every morning when I leave the house.
It's
So
even
they-
more convenient for them to park on our block than it is for them to park in that parking lot.
Mm,
We have no control over that.
right.
But
also, I was just wondering if you reached out to them to try to lease spaces from that lot that they do not use.
No, because those are, I've been a property manager for 30 years. And so actually those spaces are individual spaces deeded to individual owners. So it's not just because it's a collective lot.
Right.
Collective, that's not a collective just parking lot.
No, I understand. I own a condo in the West Loop business condo, and we have 5 deeded spots that we own as well. And we rent some of those spots out on a monthly basis. So I know they can be done by.
Oh, sure. But yeah, for us, it was suggested that it was best to do it with, we can have designated spaces and not the individual, you can park in this space, but not that one, just feels like something else that we would have to try to micromanage, and that wouldn't be most efficient.
Mr. Walker, they're, as a team, they've committed to us to explore different options to mitigate the impact on the community. So this is not the end of the discussion. But I believe Ms. Ford and her team are looking at ways that we can make this a partnership and it can be a good neighbor to the community.
Do we know?
There are a couple of other questions in the question and answer panel. So maybe we can go to those and then come back to any questions that the Walkers still have. So Angela, could you speak about the security strategy for the archives and how the building will be secured and monitored?
Well, we will have security at the building, and we will have cameras at the building, and we're not going to have a lot of loose artifacts like a traditional museum, because our archive collections are primarily digital. We will have a lot of kind of liquid walls, if you will, the digital, the giant TVs and such that might show different images. We will have art and things like that, but it won't be like high caper Fabergé egg kind of artifacts. So, but we will have security at the property.
And access to the building will be controlled only for folks that are approved to access the building, right?
Absolutely. It's not we're not doing a public space.
question in the chat about whether we explored leasing parking spaces from Mariano's, and just to respond to that, we did look into whether that would be an option. The zoning of the Mariano's does not allow leasing of parking spaces, so that was not an option for us. Angela, there's a question in the chat about how much a membership to the co-working space would be. Have you figured out the pricing strategy for the co-working space?
No, not yet.
And then there's a question in the chat: to what degree will the facility be open to the public for meetings and viewings of the archives?
Say that again, please?
Prentice, did that question go away? Question was from Kelly Mark: to what degree will the facility be open to the public for meetings and or viewings of the archives?
So the archives we will be increasing our digital archive reach, meaning that if you sign up, you can be on our mailing list to receive images and stories of new collections as they join our portfolio digitally. But the club itself is utilized for members of the club. So if your organization is one of the members, that organization may have book signings, it may have meetings, it's not a traditional public space. So but people that sign up to our website will be able to receive ongoing alerts and emails of digital images that join the archives.
This was a comment, not a question, from Robert Dabney, who says that the revitalization and renovation of the historic property will be a boon to the neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Dabney, for that comment. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. Prentice, do you have any questions?
I think you already addressed the issue about will the organization operate as a nonprofit? I think that already came up previously. And
yeah, and we can address that. The part of the organization will be a nonprofit. The Obsidian Collection Archives is a nonprofit, and then the Obsidian House will be a for-profit venture.
all right. Somebody asked if a replay will be available. Yes, we're going to make this recording available in our weekly newsletter. So yes, we will have this archived and sent out to the community. We have a live question from Mr. Jeremy Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. Has a contractor been selected to actually do the restoration and preservation work at the site?
So we've preliminarily been working with BOA Construction at this time. That did all of our preliminary estimating and the walkthrough according to our architectural drawings. So that we haven't signed contracts, but BOA has done a lot of the pre-development work.
And if everything goes to plan, which phase do you anticipate starting first?
I don't know what you mean.
So forgive me. My question is this: if everything goes according to plan, you get the zoning that you are requesting, and you get the permits and approval from the city of Chicago for everything. What do you plan on starting first at the site? Do you start on the restoration of the exterior, the interior? What is your plan for building out?
Okay. So the very first thing we have to do is stabilize the roof on the mansion. It is not in good shape. It has taken a rough toll over the last almost 20 years, and that is emergency priority number one.
If I may add to that, so this is Anthony Akinbele. So once the permit is secured, the first thing is to building envelope stabilization. That includes roof, walls, windows, all the exterior, so that make sure that the building is completely enclosed and safe. And then we move into the second phase, is working on the interior of the spaces. And then later on, the final phase will be landscape and, you know, everything else, so.
Thank you.
We have a question from Ms. Lori Edwards.
Hi, everybody. I live on the 3600 block of Calumet, and I know my neighbors on King Drive, but when you talk about going to Wells, I live right here, so I can see everything that goes on at the Lou Palmer House. In walking, if you really think that people are going to walk down to Wells past all the parking spaces on our blocks, that's not realistic. The other thing is, I don't know if anybody took into account that we have about, I would say about eight just in the immediate area. We have 8 Airbnbs, and on Calumet and on King Drive, the Airbnbs do not have access to parking. They park on the street. So depending on when you did your study on the parking, you know, as I said, the Airbnbs are coming back. The 2 that are next door to me, I noticed over maybe the last 6 months, we've had more tenants than we've ever had. And sometimes the one that's next to me, they have 6 bedrooms. So sometimes they have 3 or 4 cars or 3 or 4 trucks. That's the first part I wanted to talk about, was the parking. So I know that you did the study, but I think as we come out of the pandemic and people are traveling more, the Airbnbs in the area are going to be quite busy. And they do take up quite a few parking spaces. I don't know if you know about that. The second thing that I wanted to ask Ms. Ford about is the memberships. Does she have any commitments for these memberships? As we talk about memberships and being a nonprofit and a for-profit, how you have all these grand plans, but do you have a business plan that shows you, if you don't get the memberships, what will be your next steps in providing ongoing income into your entity? So we've never seen anything, nor have we heard anything about, as you said, you don't know what the memberships are going to be. You don't know about the co-working fees. We've seen no dollar amounts attached to anything. We've seen we've seen everybody talk about how we're going to do the mansion. It's a beautiful space. It looks like it's going to be, you know, a very grand project. But how are you going to sustain it going forward? We've never seen or heard anything about that.
So not only are we have to develop the property before we have members. I mean, that's just kind of the sequence of events, but we also are an enterprise that has relationships. Our nonprofit has been in existence. February will be 6 years. So we are not new in that space. And then our for-profit is emerging. So I think we're going to be fine on those fronts.
I only have your word for it. We've never seen any projections of income.
Okay, I don't know that that's a part of this requirement of this conversation.
I guess what I'm saying is we don't want to see it fail. I have lived here for 27 years and I've seen people come in and out of that property. So I guess we want to know that you're able to stay for a period of time and we won't be in the same predicament we're in now. That's a reasonable question.
Now, Ms. Edwards, I would like to interject that one of the reasons we're going to enter an agreement to change the zoning, but change it back to down zoning is to mitigate those concerns so no one can come in and be a problem actor if this business should not succeed. So I
Okay.
get where you're coming from, but we are thinking about that, and that's what we thought about. We looked at zoning and said, look, to allow this business to go forward, we're going to upzone it to B3.
Okay.
They've agreed willingly to downzone to residential. So that means the community still has control about whoever comes next into that space. We want to make sure this project is successful, but heaven forbid if it's not, we are putting in a safeguard to protect the community for any unwanted actors. So hopefully that answers some of your concerns regarding that.
Okay, yes, that does, because if they're not gonna have the zoning say it fails, we wouldn't want the next people to come in and with that zoning. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And Liz, I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 other questions. I think you have some questions in the chat we should probably address.
One of the questions, Angela, is will you use minority contractors? Could you talk about a little bit about your team that you have assembled in terms of minority owned or women owned business enterprises?
Yes. So far, all of our teams are Black owned. So, and I think my interior designer is a woman, Black and female, but BOA Construction is Black owned. Millhouse Engineering did our environmental, and they are Black owned. And Anthony Akindele is sitting right there with Nia Architects, and they are Black, and he owns his architectural firm. He's Black owned as well. So we are really committed to that. We're so Black, we're Obsidian.
Thank you.
That's gonna be one of the shirts.
There's another question in the chat. Is the zoning request the only obstacle to moving forward with the restoration and the use? So I'll start and then maybe have Angela supplement, but the first or next step in the process is the zoning change. Following that, we would go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and then pursue or prepare construction drawings and obtain building permits. I'm sure many of you have heard about some of the challenges in construction industry related to labor and materials. So there are some delays that are inherent in any kind of construction project. But Angela mentioned once we get through the zoning, she anticipates about a 1-year timeline for the construction to be completed. Is there anything else that you would add to that, Angela?
No, that's it, or at least, yeah, that's about it.
There are some other questions in the chat regarding parking arrangements. I think we've addressed that pretty thoroughly. And then there are still some hands raised. I'm not sure if those are left over from prior questions or if there are still remaining questions that folks have they would like for us to address. I know we're running right up around the time for this meeting. Oh.
Mr. Walker, hold on, Liz. Mr. Walker, do you have any other questions? You did have one more. Okay, ask
Yes. Really quick, Mr. Butler, can you said that this could possibly be changed to zoning B3.
Yes.
And something should happen with the business where you're not able to maintain and keep it up. Are you saying that it will automatically revert back to what it was if she were to lose the business or sell, or how does that work exactly?
No, in fact, I'm saying that no matter what, they're going to downzone themselves. We're going to downzone the property. As soon as they get all the licensing they need to function as their business, they have willingly agreed to downzone the property.
Mm-hmm.
So we're waiting for them not to succeed if that should happen. We're just building that in as a provision that we're going to downzone it back to residential.
Got it.
After they get all their licensing. We want to make sure that is in place no matter what.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Not a problem. Ms. Edwards, did you have an additional question?
No, I did not.
Okay, Mr. Garrett, I can probably get this last question in from you.
I'm gonna be quick. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a very great project. You mentioned regarding the fellows, some people don't know what fellows are. I think they're sponsorships, but what will be their role in the on the property?
So we will have physical and digital archives from Black organizations, newspapers, museums, and et cetera, all around the world. And a lot of those things have to be cataloged, stored, metadata attached. It takes those things take a lot of time, a lot of research. We have partnered with some global firms and universities. So a fellow would have a task as they pursue higher education. It'd be a whole project, and they'd be able to work on site, kind of like living at the museum.
All right. So everyone, thank you for joining the meeting tonight. I would like to discuss with everyone the next step. So the plan is to introduce the ordinance so we can get this done as soon as possible. There's a council meeting on Wednesday, the 1st of February, and I have to talk to the city to make sure I can get a ordinance done that fast, but if I can, I'd like to submit it to city council that day. The goal is to make sure we get this process going. Angela Ford has a wonderful project that's come to the community, and something I think is going to highlight all that is good about our community, the historic architecture, the Black culture, everything we worked so hard to achieve in this area over the years. So I'm excited about this project. I can't wait to see the construction begin. So congratulations to you, Ms. Ford. I look forward to moving this forward, and we'll be in conversation. I'm sure as construction gets closer, we'll probably give community updates about what to expect during that time period. And as I said before, Ms. Ford and the city collections promise to be good neighbors, and they will work through this with us about all concerns related to this project. With that being the case, everyone have a good night, and this recording will be available soon to the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
All right, good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.